Welcome to The Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. For the last few Authority File series, I've been telling you all about our new podcast called Patron Driven. It's coming up in late June, and we're really excited for you to hear it. It's going to be much different than The Authority File. It's a lot like the narrative-style podcast many of you probably listen to. It's much more story-driven. Season 1 is a 5-part series that follows 4 librarians through the destruction of the Lone Star College Kingwood Library after Hurricane Harvey, the 2 years it took to rebuild, and the new space, services, and relationships that emerged from it all. Lone Star College is a community college out in Texas. It's such a great story. It's got drama, grit, perseverance, and it's a terrific library success story. Patron Driven debuts in late June wherever you get your podcasts. You can visit our website, choice360.org, to learn more about it. Click on the librarianship drop-down to find the Patron Driven landing page where you can access more info and sign up for email updates. While you're there, you'll find behind-the-scenes bonus content for the new program, and you can check out the new trailer for the upcoming series. Okay, so back to the Authority File. We've got another great set of episodes on deck, and my guest for the next 4 weeks is Sarah Todd, who, along with Sebastian Savard, co-edited the book Canadian Perspectives on Community Development, which is published by the University of Ottawa Press. Through its contributed pieces, the book takes an incredibly thorough look at how community work is practiced in Canada. As you can imagine, community work in Canada, but anywhere really, is complex, which gives rise to a diverse set of practices that makes it difficult to think of a quote-unquote Canadian approach to social work. This is what Sarah and Sebastian address in their book, looking for the through lines in that complexity of community development, particularly in forging new pathways of communication between Anglophone and Francophone communities. In this first episode, brought to you by University of Ottawa Press, Sarah talks about how she and Sebastian came together and how their respective work and research inspired the direction of their book. All right, so Sarah, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. So, wanted to start with a hopefully a pretty easy question for you, but I wanted to talk about how this book. Why was it necessary? How did the sort of idea for it start? How did the book come together initially?
So initially, Sebastian and I were talking about teaching graduate students how to do community work. And while there's lots of materials to use with undergraduate students, both of us felt that we didn't have a lot to draw on to teach more advanced approaches, more thoughtful, theoretically informed approaches to community development. And so felt that our graduate classrooms were kind of sparse. And when we talked more, we also realized that what we were teaching in our graduate classes, me in an English-speaking Canadian classroom and Sebastian in a Francophone classroom, were really different. There wasn't much connection between what was happening in a Francophone and Anglophone classroom. So was the initial sort of discovery of both commonality and difference that inspired the need for this kind of book.
Okay, and Sebastian is Sebastian Savard. Is he? Does he teach it at your same school, or do you teach at different institutions?
No, we Sebastian and I both live in Ottawa, Canada, which is a bilingual city, and I teach in the Anglophone English-speaking university, where students are primarily English-speaking, and he teaches social work in University of Ottawa, which is a Francophone university, primarily Francophone-speaking students. So we teach at different institutions in the same city.
Okay, so obviously Sebastian co-edited the book with you. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the two of you came together on this title. You've since become good friends. How did the two of you meet? Tell us a little bit about sort of the origin story of you and Sebastian in the book.
Right. So Sebastian and I were both involved with the Canadian Association of Social Work Education, and we were involved in the journal for that association. And it's an interesting journal in that it requires there be an Anglophone English-speaking editor and a Francophone-speaking editor to make sure that the journal is bilingual. One of the great things about reinforcing that structure is Sebastian, as a Francophone Canadian, would not necessarily have a lot of opportunities to develop relationships with English-speaking Canadians, and myself, as an English-speaking Canadian, wouldn't have a lot of opportunities to become friends with a Francophone Canadian. But being co-editors, we were really put into this position of getting to know each other and learning about each other. And from that, we became both colleagues and friends. And it gave a fabulous opportunity for us to see into each other's communities and to each other's teaching, and to learn a lot from each other.
Okay. So, just explain again, how did the two of you decide to actually write this book? How did your sort of friendship and I think as you're sort of hinting at, your respective work and research help inform the direction of the book?
So I think, one of the great things about friendship is it's a space where learning and curiosity, you can take risks, right? In ways that I think uh, uh, Sebastian would maybe be uncomfortable or a bit nervous about speaking in English, and ways in which I would feel not wanting to ask the wrong question to a Francophone. We got over that because of the friendship, and that created so much excitement and curiosity and learning, that we saw the opportunity to come together to create a book that might mirror that creativity and that connection. So what we wanted was the learning that was happening in our friendship across linguistic communities to be sort of sketched out into a textbook, so the students in our classrooms and the scholars we work with would also have the opportunity for that kind of excitement and learning and curiosity. And so that was sort of the very personal foundation, which then we opened up in talking to each of us, to the colleagues we knew across the country, about their experiences, to come together and put those in conversation in a text.
Okay, excellent. So the book is Canadian Perspectives on Community Development. I'm wondering if, just to give us a little background and to sort of set the stage a little bit, if you could tell us a bit about, I know this is a really kind of a broad question, but um, just characterize generally for us, I guess, community work and community development as it's practiced in Canada.
Right. So I think, as your sort of question points to, it's really diverse, right? I
Yeah.
can't give you a sort of universal thing, but
Yeah.
uh, what I can say is across the country, there are communities who are disadvantaged or disenfranchised for various reasons. Some related to immigration, some related to identity, some related to poverty, aging, all sorts of things. And because their needs aren't being met, they come together in groups. And that coming together is often facilitated by community workers, whether they work for nonprofits, whether they're students, whether they're community activists, or whether they work for the government. They come and sit with communities, listen to their needs, and help them figure out ways to come together in a shared experience to either meet their own needs and or to make demands on the state to meet those. So in some parts of the country, that's very much work that happens at a very local level, and the state is not involved. In other parts of the country, like Quebec, the state is very invested in community organizing and community development work, and so funds a lot of that work to happen. And then you see out on the East Coast, where there's a long tradition of universities being involved in grassroots communities to facilitate social change. You see sort of community university partnerships coming together to create change, to work towards social justice. So sometimes it's very independent and grassroots, and other times it's more of a relationship with the state or with institutions of the state.
Okay. What is it that sort of influences those different approaches? I'm wondering why there might be these sort of regional differences in how different parts of the country perform community work.
Right. So a lot of it's historical. So you see in you see cultures develop out of tradition, right? And
Yeah.
so some of it's tradition. You see on the east coast of Canada a tradition of and what's called the Antigonish movement, where universities have historically been very involved with the local communities and with listening and having conversations. So over time, trust builds, relationships build, and those practices become part of the fabric of the country. In Quebec, you see a very different history, a history of a government that has had more sort of collectivist tendencies, and there's more of a comfort and demand from citizens that the state take responsibility to care for its citizens.
Mm.
And that, for, better or worse, right? There's been historical moments where that relationship between the state and the church in Quebec has been quite repressive and made social justice difficult. But at other moments, it's also meant that Quebec has often led in terms of social justice. Even right now, student movements across the country around tuition rates, Quebec, the students have led in making demands on the state that it understand education as a public right. And then there are other parts of Anglophone Canada that probably has more relationship with the United States in sort of similarity, where the state has increasingly, through neoliberalist turns, sort of taken a step back and said, communities, here you go and deal with your own issues. And that's created lots of opportunities for potential in communities, and also created vulnerabilities when certain communities don't necessarily have the social capital to come together. So I think it's about history, and of course, like, what needs to be in there also is Indigenous histories,
Right.
and the sort of settler colonial relations that, as Indigenous communities have really coalesced in recent years and taken strong political positions in Canada to say, they are legitimate nations that need to be understood. That history of understanding oneself as separate and equal is also what shapes the contemporary reality, so that it is so diverse, and that gives us opportunities to learn from each other, right? Each tradition has both its strengths and its limits that we can learn from.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. That was very helpful. Thank you. Um, and I'm getting the sense that, like, as you were describing earlier, your relationship with Sebastian, your working relationship, is sort of a almost like a microcosm, I would think, of really what you're trying to accomplish with the book overall, in terms of showing where sort of different communities and different approaches and different practices can kind of blend together and be repurposed and sort of reconstituted and applied in different ways. Is that kind of an accurate assumption there?
Yeah, I mean, I think what our friendship really made visible was both that we faced common challenges and
Mm.
common concerns for social justice and a different kind of future, and how to teach students to imagine different futures. But it also really laid bare how much uh, we didn't know about each other, and how much we didn't know about each other's communities, and how little each of us communicated across that linguistic divide, and that meant that there are losses in that, losses both in not understanding each other, but also losses in terms of being able to teach our students that there are different futures to imagine, that we um, hadn't thought about because of not having conversation across difference. And in this particular instance, that's a linguistic difference, that those communities we didn't know much about, and we didn't have many connections across them.
You just heard from Sarah Todd. Sarah is professor and director of the School of Social Work at Carleton University in Ottawa. She is also a 3M teaching fellow. She is the co-editor of Canadian Perspectives on Community Development along with Sebastian Savard, who is full professor and interim director of the School of Social Work at the University of Ottawa. Canadian Perspectives on Community Development is published by University of Ottawa Press. This episode is brought to you by the University of Ottawa Press. Join us next week when we continue our conversation and talk about why a theoretical approach to community work is so important.
The problem that Sebastian and I see when you don't think about community practice in a sort of highly theoretical way is that you can forget about reflecting on what we're actually aiming for in the bigger picture. There have been great community organizers that have organized human beings to do terrible things. And there have been great community organizers that have organized communities to do wonderful things that head us towards social justice. And so what theory offers is that roadmap, that sort of general direction of checking in. Are these activities and techniques, to what purpose are we heading?
If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if there's a topic you'd like us to cover, drop me a line. I'm at bmickey@ala-choice.org. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.